Okay, good evening, everybody, again. Today we're going to talk about the coaching habit, which is this lovely book by Bungay Stonier. He's Australian, actually, lovely guy. And why I picked this book to talk about is that of all the books on coaching I've read, this is probably the simplest and, in a way, the most powerful, because it condenses a lot of what we know into the real importance of asking a set of questions. And he distills it actually into 7 main questions. So I'm just going to present the questions and we'll see how we go for time and how long everybody wants to stay online. But I was going to present the first 3 questions and then perhaps try a little bit of coaching in Zoom rooms. So I have done a quick presentation today. I was umming and ahhing, as some of you might know, about doing a presentation, but I've had to make some notes somehow. So I've done it on a PowerPoint, very, very simple, just black on white. So I'm going to share my screen and talk you through the slide presentation. So here we have, let's view in slideshow. Right. Actually, PowerPoint decided that this was a good image. I don't know whether it picked up the word coach and decided to put a whistle, but that's what happened, and I didn't argue with it. So that's what we got then. Because I think people, when they think of coaching, a lot of the time, people who are not in the coaching or psychological world, they often think of coaching as being sports coaching, and of course there's an awful lot of parallels. So we're happy to keep it like that. So all the way through this, I'll be talking as if I've written the book, because I'm not going to go all the way through and says, well, you know, Michael says question 2, but take it that most of this is plagiarized from the book. It's a summary of the book, really, which I know some of you have read. Do you want to just put your hand up if you've actually read the book? I think 1 or 2 of you had. So what people think of as the moment of discovery in coaching is really the discovery of the question. That's a quote by Jonas Salk, whoever he is, in fact. So this book is all about the question. So it's also about changing habits. Sometimes they're habits of a lifetime. Sometimes they're just habits that we've developed as a coach. And the fact is that in order to change a habit, we have to have several factors. One is a very good reason, and often that reason might be, you know, for a higher purpose, or a service to the world, or a service to the community, or indeed to our family. So a good reason for giving up smoking might be, I vow to give up smoking in order to protect my family's health. So you have to have a reason. You also have to have a trigger. So often what behaviors we want to change are triggered by a certain moment. And the important thing to change a habit is to identify the trigger that precedes the actual habit behavior. So it might be at a certain place, a certain time. You might be in a certain emotional state with specific people, or there could be something that happens prior to this habit forming. And when we try to change a habit, it's also quite good, so they say, to look at the micro habit. So look at 1 or 2 steps in changing the habit, not try and change everything at once. So for example, if you are looking to change a habit of smoking, you might realize that the first thing you do is start, you know, twitching your fingers, feeling you've got, you know, there's something you want to do with your fingers, or you're reaching in your pocket, or, you know, there's something that or having a glass of wine, you automatically then think you want to have a drink. So be clear on what these small habits are that you want to change the big habit. And obviously, to change a habit, you have to practice. So try the new behavior and practice it, but don't try and maybe practice everything at once. So the example he gives is, if you want to practice your tennis swing for serving, you might just want to learn to throw the ball up really well a few times to make sure you've got the right trajectory for the ball. And then you've got to have a plan. And the plan might also, as well as a plan to succeed, might also be a plan for what happens when you fail, because we often will fail, how to get it back on track. So his tip is, start somewhere easy, start somewhere small. And with anything that we want to do well and change, it's often very good to have a buddy, because we can be, a bit accountable to that buddy. So that's all just a little, prologue, I suppose. So the book is a lot about changing our coaching habits. And the one big habit that's referred to time and again, and it's something that really struck me, because I know that it's something I really need to be aware of as a coach, and that is falling into the advice trap. So the book is really about how to ask great questions without falling into the advice trap. And he talks about the advice trap being like a mouse trap with a piece of cheese on it. And the piece of cheese might be somebody saying, I'm so stressed, I really don't know what to do. And, automatically want to sort of rescue that person and give them a piece of advice. So this book is all about reverting each time to the question. Keep thinking of a question and don't give them an answer, or don't disguise something as a good question, which actually is advice. And I'll come to that a bit later on. So the first principle in any form of coaching, and I thought this was something that struck me. I've only really sort of focused on the things that particularly struck me. But the one thing is, if we're going to ask questions, make sure we only ask one question at a time. He says, just one question. And quote from the book, sometimes being on the receiving end of someone with a pocket full of questions can be like a moment of Parisian driving. Questions come hurling at you right and left. There's no time to answer any of them, and you're left feeling dazed and confused. So instead of adding another question, and then another question, and then another question, the new habit is to ask just one question and then be quiet and wait for the answer. So the first question in the book, there's 7 questions, so you can see we can pace ourselves. The first question is the so-called kickstart question. The most fail-safe way to start a chat that quickly turns into a real conversation is to ask the question, what's on your mind? This is the same as asking, let's talk about the thing that matters most to you right now. So he gives some context for this. These questions might be structured in different sort of categories, and often it will be one of the so-called 3 Ps. So it could be something around projects, things that the person's got to get done, people, so people who are connected to them have relationships, might be challenging relationships, and patterns. So, it could be patterns of behavior, or it could be, certain recurring issues, or, psychological patterns. So does that all make sense so far? I can't see faces anymore because I've removed the icons, but if as I'm talking, something doesn't make sense, or I'm going too fast, or you have a genuine question that can't wait, then will you ask it in the Q&A section? But hopefully we're not going too fast. So the first new habit that we want to try and break and change is, sometimes we'll start off a coaching session, and because we're nice and warm and friendly, and we want to create rapport, and we want to warm them up gently, and we want them to like us and smile and think we're charming and affable and easy to talk to. So we start off with a lot of small talk, and then more small talk, and then we'll move into giving some advice, and then we'll default to a standard agenda or telling the person what the topic of conversation is or should be, which of course is really the opposite of coaching. Not quite sure what it is. It's probably, having a chat with a friend, but it isn't really coaching. So the first habit we need to reinforce is this whole will to stay curious, genuinely curious, and ask a question. What's really on your mind? And, you might take a few tries at saying that in a way that, sounds very genuine and not fake. But this is the opening question. This is the thing that's going to get the coaching session off to a great start. I would say that there are slight exceptions, because if the person has already told you why they want to have a session with you, so they've already had a bit of an assessment for coaching, and they've given you in detail the whole picture of what's up, and then you immediately start a session with the question without any reference to what's been said. You don't want it to sound mechanistic and fake. So that's the only thing I'd say. Normally, you might not have seen your client for a couple of weeks or spoken to them. So it's quite natural to say, what's on your mind? Or what's most on your mind? And that's how to get the thing moving. Another habit you might like to look at is the fact that you set up your great question, but then you frame it and you explain it, you present it in a different way, then you warm up to it, and generally you take forever to get to the moment of asking the real question. So you might say, well, what if, and how would you feel, and what would it be like, or have you thought, should we talk this? And you kind of just rumble around, and you kind of getting to ask the question, but you feel it's a little bit rude perhaps, or a little bit too direct to get straight to the point and actually ask the question. But his point is, you don't need all the long preamble. You don't need to waste lots of time, warming the client up, lots of small talk, lots of going round the bush, but actually go straight for it. And what he says is that you think of a great Bond movie, some of the best movies, action movies that really, they get off to a flying start because, the character, there's the opening credits and the music, and then you see the Bond character just immediately abseiling off a cliff onto a boat. So you go, yeah, that's really, we've really got it moving. So he uses that analogy and says, in a way, a coaching session, you've got to use the time wisely. Just go for it. As long as you're asking in a genuine interest and care, just go straight for it. What's on your mind. So the second question is the or question. The or question, AWE. So he says, what is the best coaching question in the world? What 3 short words are you going to learn to absolutely marvel at? And he says, and what else? Now, this is genius, actually, when you think about it. And when I just present a little bit more the context for that, because even though we don't really know what the issue is, we often are quite sure that we have the answer that our client needs. So apart from anything else, asking and what else stops us being triggered into giving advice, and it buys us time as well to kind of think, maybe really reflect on what's been said before, really deeply listen, and what else. So there's 4 practical tips here for asking what else. Firstly, stay curious and stay genuine. So obviously you have to ask with genuine interest, not like you've just learnt that sentence out of a book and you're trotting it out like it's not really in your heart to know. You have to ask with genuine interest, obviously. He says, ask it one more time. So ask it at least 3 times, but probably less than 5. So that might sound weird until you see some examples from the book, but you want to get to the point where you've asked it enough times that the person is likely to say, well, there is nothing else. That's really success. That is the success of your technique, is that they finally said, well, there is nothing else, because they've actually got to the, could be the very last thing that they say. Because often people say something which is on the top of their mind, but actually when they're asked what else and what else, they go deeper and they go deeper and they think, well, actually, really what it is, I feel hurt that I wasn't included in that meeting. They might not come out with that first, so asking it 2 or 3 times repeatedly allows the person to reflect and go a little bit deeper, dig a little bit deeper. But then move on, but only when it's time and when you've got to the point of closure. But you don't ask it in such a way that, right, that's it, you don't have any more opportunity to offer, to come up with anything that's on your mind. So you leave a little bit of the door open rather than closed. So reading from the book here, finding the right moment, and what else is such a useful question that you can add it into almost every exchange. For example, when you've asked someone what's on your mind and she answers, ask, and what else? When someone's told you about a course of action she intends to take, challenge her with, and what else could you do? And when you're trying to find the heart of the issue and you ask, what's the real challenge for you here? And he offers up a timid or vague or insipid first answer, push deeper and ask, what else is a challenge here for you? And when you start your weekly check-in meeting by asking, what's important right now? Keep the pressure on by asking, and what else? And when someone's nudging a new idea to the fore, exploring new boundaries of courage and possibility, hold the space and deepen the potential by asking, and what else might be possible? And when you're brainstorming new ideas and you don't want to get bogged down, keep the energy up by firing out, and what else? So why does and what else work so well? Because it keeps people generating options and keeps you shut up. So the trigger here is the opposite of that. It's when someone has given you an idea, some advice, when you're sure you know the answer and are desperate to tell him, or when he hasn't yet said there is nothing else. So I'm going to go through the 3rd habit and then we'll have a break, have a little bit of a discussion, Q&A, and then we'll see if we want to split up into some breakout groups to practice the first 3 habits. So the 3rd habit here, the new habit, is to stop offering up advice with a question mark. So I know I think I'm a bit guilty of this. I don't know if any of you feel the same, but you may inadvertently been asking questions in a coaching session like, well, have you thought of doing this? Or what about that course of action? Or have you considered? Well, clearly, really, this is giving advice. It isn't really asking a question at all, is it? So instead of actually going about it like that, asking, giving advice with a question mark, ask one of the 7 essential questions. And if I want to present an idea, I'll offer it up as an option rather than question. So you'll actually say, then they've come up with all their ideas, and then you might ask permission. Well, I do have some thoughts on this. Do I have permission to give you a suggestion? And they can take it or leave it. But, you know, you mustn't put the idea into their mind. So the third question is the focus question. So you've got to be able to focus on the real problem with the client, not the first one they come up with or the wrong one. And so the key then is to ask this fantastic question: what's the real challenge for you here? So in the book, he gives some examples, which I quite like this, about what he calls about coaching the ghost. So, so you start with genuine curiosity. What's on your mind? John. Absolutely. He's a nightmare. Never before have I met someone who suffers more acutely from SOS, shiny object syndrome. He's so scattered that it's like working with confetti. What? No, really, tell me more, you encourage. Oh, and that's just the start of it. Is a very slippery relationship with truth and reality. It's not that he's lying exactly, it's just that the boundary between truth and not truth, well, there isn't one. Oh my God, what else? Did I tell you about the time when he... And so it goes on. A solid 45 minutes talking about John. And no doubt it's a thoroughly entertaining conversation, at the end of which you both feel much better, thanks to your inherent superiority over John and all his many flaws. And you feel like you've done such good coaching work because not only were you actively listening the whole time, but you were also bonding so deeply. This, however, is not coaching or managing. It's gossiping, or more bluntly, bitching and moaning. So we have to learn not to get sucked into other people's dramas. And like he says, you know, we think, oh, well, it's really, you know, acknowledging the client, their feelings, you know, empathizing with them, being on their side, being their advocate, being their ally. No, it's none of those. It really is just bitching and wasting time. So if somebody starts to go on about what he calls a ghost, something else that's outside the room, a drama, a story, somebody that's messed them about, something that's really happened that they're complaining about, you might say, I have a sense of the overall challenge, but what's the real challenge here for you? And they then start to think about, you know, how would they frame the challenge with John? Is it that they fear that John's so unpredictable that he might actually get, you know, he might get fired or something? And then you'd follow up with a secondary, and what else? What's another challenge? What else is on your mind? So you can keep digging until he really gets to the heart of it, you know, to the real pith. So just before we have a little discussion break, what he suggests is essentially the perfect for the beginning part of these 7 questions, the first 3 questions, the most fundamental, that you can string them together, you know, in the perfect 1, 2, 3. So this is what we're going to try and practice. So what's on your mind? Is there anything else on your mind? So what's the real challenge here for you? And what else is the real challenge for you? Is there anything else? So what's the real challenge here for you? That might sound a little bit artificial in some way, but it makes the point. And I think that that's, you know, worth us trying to just see how that goes with, you know, a real issue. We'll have to all quickly dream up something that is on our mind that would be useful to talk about for a few minutes. So I'm going to go back to the group here, and Aries, if you can hear me, let's unmute everybody. So
you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Did I mute myself?
Yes, you did.
Just then?
Yeah, just for a few
So
seconds.
how, let's see, somebody, there's a chat here. It all makes sense. So somebody says, that's great. So that's Karen. So how's that sitting with you to start with? I know one of you, two of you might have read the book. Does this seem like too simplistic? Or does it seem, for me, yes, it's simple, but I also know that after all these years of coaching, I still fall into the advice trap. So for me, any ways to try and avoid that, you know, is a useful resource. So anybody want to comment on it?
I do find the question simple, but I find actually the simplest question is always the most powerful questions.
Mm.
I don't know whether any of you have read the book on clean language. I think it's really, really powerful if you know how to use it. It's just, I mean, there are three ways of doing, but the most common question that they like to ask is, what kind of whatever is that? And the person will just go drilling down and then you say anything else about it, and then you keep asking the questions. So just like what's on your mind? Is there anything else on your mind? So what else is actually a very powerful question. So you use it at the beginning. You also use it in option to keep them asking them. Yeah. Yeah.
And I thank you. Thanks for that. And can I ask Mary Claude, how does that sit with, you know, the coach training that you've done, the Association for Coaching accreditation, wasn't it? So would they actually use that sort of model, foundational question model, or would it be somewhat different?
Well, it's a bit of both. We do use the question "what else," but more in the option section. And we do use the question, how challenging is this for you? Right at the beginning of the session, in the goal section. So we do, where there are very valid questions, but not in that format, not in that order. And and they do say that we can repeat questions. You know, you can ask a question at the beginning, like what's on your mind and what else, and then ask it again later, you know, for something else. So it is valid, yes. Yeah.
So I think what we'll do is maybe we'll stop the recording here now, Aries, and